What is your vision? Are you protecting that vision? Every day, are you working for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a couple of hours towards what that vision looks like? The most important thing that you own right now and will continue to own is your attention.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Today is a fascinating opportunity for role reversal. Rather than Steve being the interviewer, he is today the interviewee. And I put forth this suggestion a couple of months ago, paying attention to the podcast. It's great to see the insights and thinking and contributions of some fascinating thought leaders serving lawyers and law firms. Well, one of the thought leaders who I think makes amazing contributions to lawyers and law firms is our own Steve Riley. And I thought, boy, what a great opportunity to pick his brain and to gain some insight from him. So we're going to get to peer into the odd and unusual mind of Steve Riley today. And we really are going to have a conversation about the future practice of law, the future of the law firm. And Steve, I don't think you would consider yourself to be a futurist per se. I just know that these things, because of the work that we do and your skills, you pay attention to the future, and you are well aware that the future is unraveling quickly in front of us. And although we might be asking questions about what things look like 10 years from now, it seems like the future is having a real present day impact. And I'm curious, do you agree with that? And do you see that? And are you encountering that?
Well, first, thanks for doing the role reversal. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the kind words about being a thought leader. And I thought I would be having a great opportunity to hang out and talk to you today. So I thought that was the predominant reason to do the podcast with you, because I don't get to hang out with you that much. So, yeah, I think people are feeling a greater sense of anxiety because the rate of change seems to be happening so quickly for everyone. Everything from technology, you and I are doing this in the first quarter of 2025, so political changes have occurred after the election. Some economic changes, world changes, a lot of things are happening. And I think people get more anxious. They're used to some speed of change, they're used to some level of change, but they get very anxious about, well, this is okay, but the speed of change is going a lot faster than I agreed to. Like, I did not agree to this speed of change, and we need to slow this right down. Like, the carousel is going too fast. Hit the brakes. And when you add that to practice stress, life stress, family stress, people get pretty heated and very anxious, which only adds more stress to it. So when you bring up the conversation about the future, I think the speed of change is for a lot of people emotionally happening quickly and a lot faster than anyone's ever been used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I agree with you. I think the speed of change seems to be much more intense at this point in time.
Yeah, human beings are incredibly adaptable as long as the pace of change is within their pace of adapting. And when it accelerates, that really does cause a lot of anxiety. One of my favorite songwriters and performers is Jim Steinman, who wrote a lot of music for Meatloaf, and they have a great song that's not popular, but it's called "The Future Ain't What It Used to Be." And when change is happening fast, it just feels like, the future isn't what it used to be. I'm curious, in 2025, what do you see as some of the three biggest challenges an attorney is facing when it comes to either starting their practice or initiating or igniting change and growth in their practice? What what are the future's coming fast, but right now, what are the obstacles or the hurdles that they're encountering?
It's a great question. I think this applies to anyone, any human being. And I think one of the challenges that most of us have who are in the legal industry, and I call it being busy to death. Most of us get really intensely buried in our work, whether it's email, phone calls, Zoom meetings, team meetings, Slack, this, that, and the other thing. And when you are practicing or in a practice, the intense needs of your clients become paramount. And you can see this where lawyers are working really, really long hours and sacrificing their own health and well-being, and sometimes sacrificing time with their family, and most times sacrificing time with their family. So I think the biggest challenge that most people have, especially when they're feeling a speed of change, is protecting their vision for what their life looks like. So if you think about how we talk to our members, one of the kind of prompts we use and one of the phrases that we use as a vision protection strategy is around the question of what does your great life and what does your great practice look like to you? Now, this is confronting to a lot of people because when you ask them what a great life looks like to them, they usually will say, I don't have time for this. Like, I literally do not have time for this, which means they get caught up in tasks, the doing of life, not the living of life. So one of the challenges that I think most of us have, especially when we're committed professionals and trying to really do great by our clients and great by our family, is taking the time in the moment to really protect what your vision looks like, because everything about the future that you currently are thinking about is made up. Like, everything you're thinking about the future is made up. Really, when you and I are saying that the future is getting here faster than we realize, it has nothing to do with the future. It has everything to do with the feeling of speed of change. So I think for a lot of people, the ability to protect their mind, protect their confidence, protect their vision of what they think their life should look like, the story they've made up about their life, the vision that they're trying to live into, is to really think about, how do I protect that? How do I live into that? How do I continue to take strategic action, not tactical action, but strategic action into what my lifetime legacy is, to what my vision for what a great life looks like to me, to what great health looks like to me, to what a great practice looks like, to what great clients look like. And my standard is great. My standard is always great. Play for greatness, and if you get good, that's totally cool. But to play for greatness, because playing neutral is how most people do it. They just kind of do tasks. They don't really have a lot of color to it. A lot of lawyers are kind of living, I would say, black and white lives, where they're just doing the same tasks over and over and over and over, and they've lost a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of excitement. So I think the number one thing for me is really, what is your vision? Are you protecting that vision? Every day, are you working for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a couple of hours towards what that vision looks like? The most important thing that you own right now and will continue to own is your attention. And you and I were talking before about the incredible vortex that you can get sucked into with social media. And I sometimes will admit that I perhaps have a Twitter/X addiction, and I get most of my news from that. You and I also watch stuff off of YouTube. I've not actually watched TV since 2018. And I was thinking about, my wife and I were talking about that. We've got this great big flat screen TV, and I use it mainly to play the Xbox on. And I don't watch TV. If there's something I want to see, I'll get the highlights off of YouTube, or, if I want to watch it live, I can pull it up on, Twitter or something like that. So it's really that I'm trying to do more at this point in my life to control where my eyeballs go and control where my attention goes, because there's so many social media giants out there that are trying to get my eyeballs so they can sell my attention to an advertiser or to some marketer. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, first and foremost, is thinking, how do I protect my attention? How do I protect my vision? How do I work every day and develop a habit of isolating and proactively trying to live into what I think my future should look like and what my future should feel, but using today as that stepping stone into it. So that's my first one. Any thoughts on that before I tell you my second one?
Yeah. Let me, I think back to some advice that a mentor or coach gave me 25, 30 years ago, knowing me. And they diagnosed me as suffering from hurry sickness. And that constant need to always be in a hurry. And the advice they gave me was, I had to ruthlessly root out hurry in all aspects of my life. And I think I've, especially as I've gotten older, I'm not so sure I've been triumphant at that. But I recognize how hurriedness causes a degree of superficiality in the pursuit of my vision. And I think because no vision is achieved overnight. No worthwhile vision is achieved overnight. And I'm fascinated by the statement, vision protection, because once you have it, you need to feed that vision, because almost all of the forces that work on you as a visionary, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, are inviting you to a superficial version of that vision. I think that's really fascinating. And then all of us have a degree of attention deficit disorder, and I'm not sure we're paying attention to what we ought to be paying attention to. The other thing I was going to add, I think the most annoying aspect that you bring to the groups that you facilitate, and I'm sure you hear this, is you annoyingly do not let people settle for a less than great game. And you're an agitator in that way. And what vision, how uninspiring is a good vision? The only visions that are really worth the energy of the talent of the people who come to us is a great vision in their life and in their practice. And I just want to compliment you for continuing to be annoying to people and not letting them settle for a less than great pursuit of a vision.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I always thought I was a catalyst. I never considered myself an agitator, but I guess that's fair. That's a fair criticism.
Okay, so what else do you see are challenges that somebody who is really trying to play, their practice is, launching and igniting their practice is critical to their vision of the future. What other challenges do they have to overcome?
If we continue to work with the theme of greatness, and we work with the premise that everything great is always uphill, like if it's easy, you got it, like you know how to do that. But something great requires an investment of time, effort, it requires money, it requires work. You got to go uphill to get something great. And a great life is never free, it's never handed to you. And so it's an earned experience. So I think the second thing is learning how to lead yourself and others through change. Now, the metaphor I would use here is probably not a great one, and I'll probably get in trouble with it, but the metaphor here for me is kind of like being a captain of a ship, and you're kind of the captain of your own ship. And you are creating what a great life looks like to you and what that looks like to your team, and you're kind of navigating the trip. So your ability to think through, manage, and lead through change so that you are a captain and kind of not a castaway, so to speak, you are in a position where you're responsible and accountable for that. And that's a scary place for a lot of people to be completely kind of like a Carl Jung position where you're completely accountable for everything that's going on in your life. You are really taking on the challenge of, okay, things will change. And I have to be resilient. I have to think through the change. I have to adopt to the change and really develop some resilience to respecting that you will have to earn the great thing that you're after, whatever that great thing is. Because growth is never a straight line. You never go from A to B. When I taught the Double Your Revenue workshop, it's always interesting that nobody had a straight line to a double your revenue. Well, one person might have, but usually they had a staggering grow, create a platform, build, kind of like they would grow tremendously, then they would flatten out for a while. And what they would do is build kind of like a capability platform. They'd hire more people, they'd invest in more resources, they put more staff together, they do more training, and then they would have another spurt of growth like 12 to 18 months, then they would level off. So it looked more like a stairs, like they're climbing stairs in a straight line. And I think part of that was directly correlated to the lawyer could have enough cash flow and enough vision to see about 12 to 14 to 18 months out. They could see growth, they would get growth, and they would get there, and they would catch their breath, and they stabilize everything, and look around, okay, now how do I get to the next plateau? And they would plateau for about 12 to 14 months, and then they would jump again. So it looked like these really funny stair steps. And there's a handful of firms that doubled quickly, like 6 months, 12 months, but the average was about doubling in 24 months. So I really noticed that for them, it wasn't a straight trajectory. It was really kind of learn, hit an obstacle, strategize how to overcome the obstacle, be resilient, have a breakthrough around the obstacle or work around the obstacle, and then have a period of flourishing growth, hit another obstacle or go backwards. And I really think that's probably the biggest thing is how do you keep your head straight and manage change, because it's going to happen. If you're trying to grow and your goal, whatever your goal is, requires you to have growth, then you're going to hit some obstacle. You're going to have some price you pay. There's going to be some stress or strain. My beautiful wife, Kristen, has this funny quote. She goes, "Nothing changes till something changes." So I always love that quote, and she uses it almost every day. But nothing changes till something changes. And if you're trying to get growth in your firm, you're trying to get growth in your life, interestingly, the first thing that needs to change is you. And you have to bring something to the party. And, a lot of people expect everybody around them to change. But the real transformation, and one of the reasons I really love the work that we do together as an organization, is that for us to be better performers, for you and I to be better at what we do, better coaches, we have to change. We have to be open to change. We have to learn. And you and I have some funny lessons we've learned together, both separately and together. You have to be open to change. You have to be open that maybe you're wrong about something. Maybe your assumptions are incorrect. Maybe what you're doing right now isn't working. Maybe it's not the fact that you can't find good team. It may be that you're kind of rough or difficult to work for. So there may be some things that you have to self-reflect and look at. And I think that becomes the biggest challenge for a lot of lawyers or anyone as they look forward in 2025, if they're trying to move their ball uphill, if they're trying to, like the myth of Sisyphus, if they're trying to move that ball uphill and it keeps rolling back for them, I think they have to appreciate that at certain points in time, you have to build a platform to rest the ball, think about it, and then devise another strategy, because change is going to be probably the most important skill that you'll develop as a human being to really grow and get what you want. The ability to lead, adapt, and work with change. So that's number 2 for me, I think.
A lot of folks who are launching their practice, starting their practice, or igniting their practice, often, the driving factor is, well, I want more money, I want to help more people, and I'd like to have a little bit more free time. And I think their ability to access all of those things, as you just highlight, totally hinges on their growth practice strategy must coincide with a personal growth strategy practice. And I think a lot of frustration happens is that they're unwilling to change, but they want their practice to change, and they want their team to change, and they want their revenue to change. But I'm stuck. I'm static. I'm the fixed point. If you're going to try to launch your practice, you're going to have to also launch into a world of personal growth, because it'll force upon you, if you're doing it right, some fascinating questions that will spark growth and adaptation. Excellent. And anything else? What do you see as a challenge that they need to confront or overcome if they're going to be successful in launching their practice?
I think the development of business skills, straight up. So when I say business skills, it's the ability to interact with other people so that you can create value for them in such a way that they find it valuable and that they compensate you one way or the other for that value. And so, and value is a slippery term, like, so what is value? And so some people say, well, value is just a good enough thing. Like it's good enough, it's acceptable to me and I'll trade for that. So a lot of people don't, I think, really appreciate that when you start in a professional career, whether lawyer, legal assistant, what have you, that you've just gotten a license and the right to practice. You've got the privilege to practice. It doesn't mean you're entitled to a darn thing. And that's frustrating for a lot of people because they work so hard to get in a position, whether it's working as a paralegal, legal assistant, young lawyer, associate, or what have you. They've worked so hard and they're like, okay, I made it. Whew, I made it. I got the ticket to the show, and now let me reap the rewards. And then reality kicks in, and they realize, oh, there's so much more to learn, and there's so much more that I can do. There's so much more that I have to learn to make myself actually valuable, useful, and of service to other human beings. And that's a real challenge for a lot of people. It takes a few years for young lawyers to figure it out, and sometimes they never do. It takes a while for a lot of people to figure out, how do I become more useful, capable, and of service to other people in such a way that it makes a difference for them. So I think for a lot of lawyers, we sometimes get hung up like, well, I know how to practice law. Yeah, so what? So do, at least in Florida, 1.1 million other knuckleheads. So what? You got the license. So what? Now what are you going to do? You have the right to appear in front of a judge. You have the right to go to court. You have a right to say you're an attorney. But it's like anything else in life, unless you're making a difference for someone in such a way that they're willing to write a check for it, it doesn't really matter. So I think the biggest challenge in 2025 is helping people to look at some of their business skills. I'll list off a couple and see what you think. One is just straight up relationship building, communication skills, verbal skills, how to talk to people, how to make requests of people, how to ask for referrals. That doesn't sound terrible. Little basic things, how to play well with team members, how to collaborate. It's one of the things that you and I've had to learn to do, painfully and sometimes not so painfully, is how to collaborate and work together. So there's a lot of skill work in the communication realm just to be able to do that. The ability just to set good goals. I think there's somewhat work that you have to do to really understand how to set goals for yourself and think about those goals. I think there's some straight up sales skills that a lot of lawyers learn. I think one of the things that Victor Medina led us on in the past year or so is the Atticus Sales Academy. I think it's a fantastic commitment by us to teach lawyers, and people on the intake team sales skills. So if you're looking to really up level your skills, just like you would in a video game, you're going to have to, or up level your game, you're going to have to look at how you up level your skills. And that's hard for people to realize that, the up leveling never stops. If you want to be a bigger player, if you want certain things in your life, you're going to have to invest in improving your skills, whatever those skills may be. I mean, what are your thoughts, Glenn?
You're talking about business skills. And I think that one of the primary business skills that we're a little bit behind the curve on as lawyers is the impact AI is having on the value proposition. And I'm curious what you see the overall impact of AI on the practice today and how that might shape things well into the future.
Once again, a very easy question, right?
I like easy questions.
Yeah, you brought some easy ones today. You haven't once asked me how my vacation was. You're instead asking me these really hard questions. So let's talk about this from
you have to earn the right to get the easy question. I'll say that.
I have to bring somebody else on the podcast for easy questions, right? Hey, Steve here. Sorry to interrupt. I want to take a moment to tell you about a very cool service that could transform how you handle your estate plan signings. It's called The Best Notary, and their tagline sums it up perfectly. We help empower attorneys to transcend the physical office and deliver estate plan signings at home, statewide, in person, or via Zoom. So if you're in an estate planning practice and you're looking to streamline your operations and elevate your client experience, this is worth checking out. They offer what they call a Document Concierge service, a white glove, done-for-you solution that handles everything from document proofing, printing, to sourcing witnesses, mobile or remote notarization, deed recording, and even final portfolio assembly. Fantastic setup for anyone who's in this business. Whether your clients prefer an in-person experience or the convenience of Zoom, the best Notary delivers. Their service is perfect for tech-savvy, growth-focused lawyers who want to scale without sacrificing quality. It frees your team up, reduces administrative headaches, and ensures a smooth professional signing experience for every one of your clients. What really sets them apart is they just don't witness the signatures. They manage the entire signing process from start to finish, with all the quality control built in at every step. And yes, they can deliver signings in all 50 states and even globally, thanks to remote online notarization. If you're ready to level up your practice, visit thebestnotary.net/services-overview to fill out a quick firm profile, book a free discovery call, and see how they can support your team. Again, that's thebestnotary.net/services-overview. Check it out now and start simplifying your signings and making a greater experience for your clients today. Just a quick note, Best Notary isn't a law firm and doesn't offer legal advice. They're here to support you and be part of your team and provide an exceptional service for your clients. Well, the first time I started talking about AI in our programs was really 2010, 2011. And there's a funny video of me in 2012 when I looked much younger and had much better hair, talking about AI. And then didn't talk, and you got no traction. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And then, of course, in the past 2 years, we've done more. So I actually think the Atticus community itself is doing a good job of being in the vanguard of how to use AI in the legal industry. I think right now our members are probably at 80% application rate. So it means 8 out of 10 members are actively using AI in some way, shape, or form, according to the statistics and the tracking that we're doing. In the legal industry right now, about 20%. So we're significantly, the Atticus community is significantly ahead. So I'm really proud of our members for being fearless and jumping in, or at least jumping in fearfully and trying things. So let's talk about AI in 3 ways. Number one, AI first and foremost is a tool. So I want everyone to just relax a little bit, because it is a tool, and it is a very powerful tool. It's a very quick growing tool. It is pretty much spread like a virus everywhere, and people are using and trying to integrate it in all different ways of their current software platforms. So you can see it in Clio, you can see it in FileVine, you can see it everywhere. I could not imagine my day without using ChatGPT or Copilot personally. I just could not. I'm a much nicer person thanks to Copilot, so my email responses are very nice because Copilot drafts most of them for me. And so it is a tool. So I want everybody just to understand it's first and foremost a tool. The second thing I want you to think about is it will impact practices in a tool that I call the narrowing niche model. And I really, when I first taught about this in 2012, 2011, I created a model to talk to lawyers about it. And on the bottom of this pyramid, think of it as a pyramid, and on the bottom is a phrase that I basically say, simple processes for simple problems. So I'll give you some examples of simple processes: uncontested divorce, simple wills, simple trusts, certain types of deeds. So anything that a lawyer is probably using a legal assistant, a paralegal, a first-year associate to do, I would say within 12 to 24 months will be easily replaced by AI, if not quicker. When I did the video in 2012, I basically held up my cell phone and said, it's only a matter of time before Bank of America and Merrill Lynch create an AI product that you can just call an 800 number or go through the app and say, I'd like to draft a will. And it will ask questions and prepare it for you. And that will be completely fine because the bar associations have taken position that those are kits. LegalZoom has established the precedent on that. So when I have lawyers, I want them to look at, okay, if you've got, you know, if you take your practice and you say, okay, where in my practice am I getting simple revenue or simple problems, that are simple processes? That's where you're probably greatest at risk for AI, trimming off the bottom of that. You'll get commoditized very quickly there. And it may not be here in the US. It may be a global company that will take you out, like somebody that's not going to be regulated by your state bar, but by somebody like India or some other country may have a very clever entrepreneur that will set up a business that will sell products or sell a service or a kit to that. Or it could be a major company like Goldman Sachs or Bank of America and Merrill Lynch that creates a AI drafting bot that will basically eliminate where you're making some good bread and butter money. So what you have to do then is take a step back and look for complexity. And complexity for me is anywhere that someone has a complicated problem that they're like, well, I have no clue. I don't understand the system in which to solve this problem. And I really think most professionals, what we do for a living is ask people questions about problems that they don't know how to ask themselves. I mean, really, that's what you and I do as professionals. We ask people interesting questions about how to think about their practice. So if you think about what you do as a law firm, team leader, associate, it doesn't matter. What you're doing is help people solving complex problems inside a complex system. So wherever there's complexity, there's opportunity. So as AI may be trimming parts of your practice back, AI is actually going to create some extraordinary opportunities for growth in your practice. Now, the billable hour itself is going to be interesting because the billable hour was actually created as a way, it was created about 100 years ago by a guy named Reginald Smith. And Reginald was working for a very small law firm. He started off first as came out of Harvard, and I think it was in 1916, 1917, I have to check. And he actually ran a legal aid organization. And he had very little money to work with. So what he did was put in some really intense time management strategies. He started measuring everything. And at the time, the scientific measurement or the scientific management wave was going through Harvard, and he got a Harvard management professor to help him start measuring things. And this is where what you don't measure, you can't manage start to come from. So that's 100, 120 years ago. So Reginald started measuring how long it took to do stuff. And he did such a transformative thing that a small law firm at the time called Hell Door, with about 6 or 7 lawyers, recruited Reginald to come on and be their managing partner. And so Reginald, when he joined, he started to measure everything by the hour. And at the time, lawyers were contingency and fixed fee. And so Reginald discovered he could sell services by the hour. And Reginald ultimately created the billable hour, not so much as he started really as a time management tool, and it ended up morphing into a pricing model. So we've had it for 100 plus years. And I think I have to look, 1950s was when it basically started winning over as the way that lawyers should charge, because the ABA was comparing how lawyers were making money or not making money to doctors and dentists. And they studied the most profitable firms at the time, and Hell Door was one of the most profitable firms. It continues to be one of the most profitable firms. And they adopted the billable hour and started teaching lawyers around the country to do the billable hour. And so that's how the billable hour as a pricing model really kind of got birthed. What's my point? The billable hour is at risk, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think there's a paradox here. I think there's a tension. So you're getting ethical rules that basically say, as a lawyer, you are unable to charge for any more than the actual time you put in something. So for example, if you have a deposition that would take 4 hours to read and 2 hours to summarize and create an outline and give it to a partner, that might be 6 billable hours, right? Now you can take the same deposition either through co-counsel or through ChatGPT and have it summarized probably in 15 to 20 minutes. And then it's co-counsel does a phenomenal job of this. And some of the software products that we'll see over the next 12 to 24 months will just pretty much eliminate a lot of the simple discovery work, like reviewing depositions, reviewing medical records, reviewing contracts. A lot of that stuff will go away. Now, the problem I think we have with the billable hour is the judiciary. So for this entire time period, if you're getting your fees approved, if you're a probate lawyer, family law lawyer, guardianship lawyer, you win a case and you've got to get your fees approved, you got to go before a judge. And you can see the federal judges use the lodestar method, and there's a couple different methods for calculating what they consider a reasonable fee, how long you've been in business, what your certifications are, blah, 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 blah. And everybody knows that. So what's my point? Well, when I was practicing, if I submitted a billable bill to the local guardianship court, and let's just say it was, a $5,000 bill, it would go before a clerk, and the clerk would look at that bill and say, Brightly's not so smart, $5,000 a lot, and we can trim it to $4,500. And so they would shave a couple $100 off. Then go to the next caseworker, and the caseworker would look at that, and they would shave another $500 off. And then we go to the judge, and the judge would look at that and say, well, it's probably $3,500, so it goes from $5,000 to $3,500. And, you had one person, two people, now the judge look at it. Here's what I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating that you're going to have a lot of judges, clerks over the next, couple of years, if not sooner, figure out, I just take these hourly fees that these lawyers are giving me, set up a private chat GPT, and submit those fees. Now, if they start doing that statewide and they pump it all in, within about, I would say 90 days, you're going to figure out what a reasonable guardianship fee is going to look like, what a contested fee might look like, what a reasonable family law case might look like. And you'll start to see what the judges have been doing privately. They'll start to say what they think a reasonable fee would be for certain types of cases. Until that's done, I don't think you're going to see the billable hour go anywhere. The legislature is going to have to eliminate the billable hour as a way for judges to approve fees. So I think until the judiciary and the legislature agree that the billable hour is dead, it will be with us for a considerable period of time. However, to your point, the lawyers are going to have to really adjust how they charge and what they charge for. And I think this is one of the reasons you're going to see a lot of law firms be very reluctant about using AI, because they know that they're going to have to adjust their pricing. And most of that pricing will be forced, pricing adjustments from an hourly rate perspective will be forced upon them by their clients. And insurance companies, number one, financial institutions, number two. Any institution that controls any type of litigation will start to say, no. Can't you do this with AI? Can't you do this with AI? And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of compression on hourly rates. I think you see a lot of compression and pressure on law firms. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? That's my thought. Yeah. That's a long answer too.
But I think understanding a little bit of the history is sort of insightful in the sense that recognizing it was a way of doing analytics to determine how efficient I was, the staff was, the firm was. And it was independent of asking, what is the value the client placed on this, right? But somehow, that efficiency model, that internal metric model became a standardized pricing model, and has now given us enough of a period of time that the marketplace is saying, okay, that's not a bad way of assessing what the value of the work is. But I think AI is the game changer on that. And I think your answer is fascinating, because there's a forthcoming conflict. And that is that as AI becomes a valuable and trustworthy tool that has a high impact on streamlining and speeding up what used to be billable practices, the courts are going to say, and the power structures are going to say, nope, you can't charge, unless you've spent the time doing it. And so there's a sort of incentive for inefficiency. But the client over there is going to start looking at bills, and more savvy that the client is regarding the use and integration of AI in their world, they're going to look at your bills through that prism, and they're going to say, no. 2 hours to review that document that could have been reviewed in 15 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay that. Truth of the matter is, if you start doing more and more pricing based on the value proposition of the work, clients actually value that. And so there is that aspect that I think are going to run into conflict with each other. But if the entrepreneurial leaders in the legal practice are not paying attention to the business skill of accurately assessing the value proposition, this is an area where they're going to get run over in the future. And I think they've got to figure it out and play with it. I'm glad to see that we're a little bit on the cutting edge and on the vanguard of that, because we're, over 2 years ago, based on your prompting, I wanted every one of my clients to have at least one AI experiment going on. And now, as working with my clients, I want them to be integrating AI in some form or fashion, so they see it as a tool and are not intimidated. Just like they introduced word processing in the computer and the desktop computer, just like they introduced the fax machine, just like they introduced email, just like they introduced the internet and websites. This is another tool that they've got to be able to introduce into the practice without fear or intimidation. So,
and I think that's the point. You have to re-anchor as a lawyer. What do you do? Like, what do you do? Now, how you price what you do is the secondary conversation, which rolls around the business skills. And I really think that as lawyers, what we do is we help people solve complex problems. Now, the problems might be emotionally complex, like they can't think them through. This is where a counselor at law might be more important than like an attorney at law phrase. And the second element of that is sometimes as lawyers, we're shortcuts. We know how to solve certain problems in certain situations because we have connections and people that we do business with that we can get things resolved quickly. So I think for a lot of folks, the need to have someone solve a complex problem for you and know who to call to solve the complex problem and the way to solve the complex problem discreetly. Now, when I was practicing, that was one of the things I would get hired to do is help people solve very embarrassing problems that they would like to get resolved discreetly. And not criminal problems like, a bad business mistake. A large accounting firm had one of their long-term administrators steal 6 figures from them over a period of time. And they want to have the person arrested and get reimbursed without making it public. So sometimes you have to help people solve those discrete things. And I'm just using that as an example. So I think the thing that I would encourage lawyers to consider is that while you're adopting this tool is an emerging technology. And emerging technology causes a wake. And it causes a massive change. And so it causes a wake as it cuts through the world, it just cuts through things. So, Glenn, I do miss practicing law. I miss the negotiations of plaintiff's work. Oh, I love plaintiff's work. I really do. I really do. I miss the negotiations. I miss some of the professional relationships I have. I really do. So that I often think about going back. But one of my long-term friends and clients who, she said, you're a good lawyer, but you're a much better coach than you are a lawyer. This is really your gift. While you're a very good lawyer, this is where you make a huge difference. So stay here. And that was, profound and helpful for me to think about. But if I went back, here's my point. If I went back, I would look at 2 things, right? And so here's what I want lawyers to think about. AI is not licensed to practice law. Everybody seems to drive by this fact. So to actually be a lawyer, you have to be authorized and licensed, and you have the privilege, and I'm going to use that term on purpose, privilege to practice law. You have the privilege to go to court. You have the privilege to advocate. You have the privilege to be treated as a lawyer, a member of the bar, which is a big deal. It's a pretty big deal in my eyes, because really what you're doing is that you're representing another human being with a problem. And your job is to advocate for that human being. So the thing that I would look at is, first, anywhere that there might be dispute resolution involved, like litigation, plus emerging technology. So here are a couple things that I've thought about, and I've encouraged a couple lawyers to look at. Look at anywhere that you have the opportunity to investigate things like digital fraud or cybercrime where your client might be a victim. Recently, I was working with a law firm where they had a client have a couple of $100,000 stolen from them through a phishing scam. And with some careful investigation, it was pretty clear that the bank actually didn't comply with certain procedures. So the bank might be on the hook for this money that they wired to someone who's pretending to be somebody else. So, I'm thinking about, well, that might be a huge area. Data privacy in cybersecurity law is massive area. We just think about it. And then you think about anything with AI and IP, intellectual property. Oh my goodness, some of the litigation that's going on right now. Blockchain, crypto, digital asset law. Two of my friends actually set up law firms around cryptocurrency. Now, they have to explain to me in very simple terms, but both of them have ended up representing some very, very wealthy people in the cryptocurrency space. Now, then you're going to open up conversations around an international business and international trade because it's going to be very, very, very complicated. AI plus employment law, that's just going to be a mess. You think about, SpaceX. I think they're launching 100 SpaceX rockets this year. I think the last Falcon 9 that launched out of Cape Canaveral had 5,000 Starlink satellites on it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start thinking about how the technology is causing change throughout the world, anything where AI's infringing, causing change, causing disruption is a significant opportunity for lawyers to get involved with. Now, so for me, here's the formula. Dispute resolution or litigation, depending on how you want to frame that, plus niche, plus emerging technology equals a fantastic growth opportunity for law firms. So if you're in a position where the bottom 10% or 20% of your firm is consisting of simple processes for simple problems, what I want you to look around and say, okay, where's the complexity at? Where are places that I can help people with more complicated problems? So when I did the narrowing niche model, one of the things I predicted, and I still think is a prediction, is hyper niching. So you're going to see AI allow lawyers to hyper specialize in subspecialties in the existing specialties that they're currently in. For example, as an estate planning lawyer, you probably won't be doing just estate planning. You might be doing estate planning for blended families, and that might be your specialty. So I'm just using that as an example. In litigation, family law, you can just look around and see that as another opportunity. So I think the opportunity to grow a firm and kind of swim in the wake of AI is available. And I think a lot of lawyers are just so busy, they're not taking their head up to look, and they're saying, well, this AI stuff is cool. This AI stuff is creating some really cool opportunities for you as a business person to expand your niche or expand into. So that's the other element of this for me. What are your thoughts?
At first glance, if somebody's paying attention to this conversation, they may listen to the first part of the conversation in which you really are talking about protecting your vision and being resilient, right? That there is an aspect where you have to, do things to make sure that your attention is being directed on the vision and that you are personally growing and developing and becoming more resilient. And see that conversation is completely disconnected from the conversation around AI. But I would argue they're incredibly related because there's all kinds of opportunities for the practice of law and for lawyers to really do well in the future, to carve out their niche. And there are totally emerging aspects of the practice of law that are happening right now. The future is happening right now. But our ability to access that and to really move boldly into that is heavily connected to clarity of our vision and the habits and practices that keep us resilient as we're climbing uphill, as growth is uphill from us. This is probably a podcast that somebody may want to listen to more than once because it's when they connect the dots over those personal habits and practices that really provides opportunity to access where the future is emerging. And I see that as being really key.
The thing I want to add is I want to talk for a minute about dispute resolution, so litigation, jury trials, bench trials. I just want to talk about that for a minute because when I started thinking about this, and I spoke, I don't know, a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years ago at the summit, one of the things that came to my mind is I have a good friend. His name's Andrew, and Andrew's a Harvard MBA, brilliant guy, and he's a brilliant marketer, really, really brilliant guy. When this whole AI thing started become more and more prevalent, he's like, I guess you guys will be out of business. And I'm like, why do you say that? Well, people can just get their cases resolved by using AI. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't see it. I don't see two people agreeing to put their information into an AI chatbot and saying that once that chatbot makes a resolution, we're going to agree to that. So basically using a chatbot as arbitration, you both put your arguments into it and then let the AI decide. It reminded me, when I was a kid, there was a show I loved called Star Trek. And it featured William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. So this is old school Star Trek. And there was an episode called A Taste of Armageddon. And in the episode, there were two people, two races, basically on two different planets. And they looked identical and they were waging war with each other. And what they would do is fight war with computer simulation. And so they agreed that if they were, it's like Battleship, they agreed if you hit one of their cities, that instead of destroying the city and burning down the city, which was really messy and very expensive, the people in the city where they got hit would agree to immediately go to the incinerator. And they would walk all like orderly into the incinerator and be incinerated because those were the rules of the game between the two. And, Captain Kirk was like, this is insane. Like, you people are insane. Because if you want to have real warfare, you need to feel pain and suffering, and you need to feel the humanity of it or the lack of humanity of it. And I really think that for dispute resolution and judicial resolution, that humanity, empathy, the ability to determine the veracity of a witness, the ability to hear one's story. And I think a lot of people, at least in my experience when I was litigating, is the cathartic experience of someone getting to tell their story to a judge or jury was just that. It was cathartic. I got to tell my story, man. I got to tell them that story, like I got to tell them my story. And so the Taste of Armageddon Star Trek episode just talked about how, like war games, and people would agree to go kill themselves in some type of incinerator because that was the agreement. I think empathy, love, hate, the emotions of what drive us as human beings will ultimately have judges and ultimately have juries being the fact finders and the deciders of what is fair and what is just, for better or worse. And I think that will be one of the core issues that as lawyers, leaders, legislatures, over the next 10 to 25 years, the jurisprudence of what it means to resolve a dispute between people becomes one of the core elements. I see AI as a tool supporting that, but I personally, and I could be totally wrong, and I will be probably long gone before that issue is resolved, do not see the humanity being taken out of the courtroom, away from a judge or away from a jury. I do not see a taste of Armageddon being the thing that will reside or resolve major issues. I think minor issues may be resolved by, agreed upon arbitration through an AI agent. But I think major issues will still be advocated by a lawyer in front of a judge or a jury, because that's where the humanity comes through. That's where the story comes through. That's where the change of values comes through. That's where the change of culture comes through. And I think that is really, to me, the soul of what we do as attorneys, that we advocate and tell somebody else's story in a very powerful, meaning compelling way inside of a complex system, whether you're doing that with family law, or whether you're doing that by advising a family with estate planning, or whether you're doing that by, being a plaintiff's lawyer. I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that you're in that sacred position of advocating for another human being and protecting their rights the best you can, as well as you can, based on the facts and circumstances. So I don't think that AI, at least in the next decade, is going to replace that process. If it does, I think we will rebel. I think it's like, I don't know about you, but Kindle, I use it, I use my iPad to read books all the time, but special books I get in paper, right? Because I like them. And I think for a lot of people, I think we'll continue to keep certain things that are workable for us. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that AI will force us in the workplace and away from the workplace to become more human, to really define what it means to be human, which I think is a very good thing. I think that to the extent that AI is a tool that can streamline mechanical processing of information and make efficient recommendations, if that defines what makes us human, then that's a sad statement, right? And I think it will streamline a lot of processes, but it will give us when properly used, will give us greater liberty in the workplace so that my work is actually more of a human function. And then obviously if I use it personally, it allows me to be, much more of a human. If it takes care of tasks that allow me to give my attention to the things that matter to me, I think it's a great tool and it's an asset. So this is a fascinating conversation. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it. But I think, quite honestly, if the listener to this podcast can connect the dots between protecting the vision, being resilient in our growth, and recognizing the value proposition and taking advantage of an emerging tool that is accelerating change at a very rapid rate, but they access it as a tool, I think, quite honestly, the vision is bright for somebody who is entrepreneurial in the practice of law. And I hope that this conversation doesn't scare people, but rather inspires people.
Thank you. And thanks for guiding me through it. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode can help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.